if you spend any time in communities, forums, professional development in the education space, you will notice that there is a really key topic that is getting discussed extensively, and that is ethics or ethical use of AI. Now, I've just recently completed a course by Google Education or Google that's discussing their ethical implications and ethical use. And it was interesting to just see the relationship between industry and education and the crossovers. But there's one important thing that is missing. And it was highlighted really, really well by Dr. Nick Jackson, where he wrote this article where he interviewed a few students on their use of AI. And the thing that was really clear in any professional discussions that I've been part of, in communities of practice, in professional development, in online community forums, that when we talk about ethics and ethical use of AI, our core client, our core person that we talk about is rarely discussed, that being the student and what the implications are for them. How are they using? What are they best serving? Because there is this assumption, and I've noticed it more and more frequently in the discussions that I've been involved in, that there's an assumption that people are all using AI to shortcut the creative process and to shortcut the deep, rich work of critical and creative thinking. And it's really an interesting topic because I was actually chatting to an early career teacher who's studying to be an early career teacher at the moment. They're in their final year of university. And we were discussing what we call the Bloom's taxonomy. Now, if you're not familiar with what that is, it is a hierarchy of learning. So at the top of this pyramid, you can imagine it as a triangle. At the top, you've got critical and creative thought. That is the pinnacle of our ability to think critically and creatively. And at the fundamental foundational level, you've got things like identifying, describing, and it works up through explaining, analysis, and so on. And it's interesting because there's these discussions that I've heard at university level where people are using AI or students are using AI, and this is becoming a generalist term, to create, and using generative AI to create their responses, to write their essays, to submit their, create their assessment tasks, rather than using it to reflect on their learning or reflect and get feedback on their ability. And it was interesting because when I was discussing with this student, that whole generalization that everyone is using it to shortcut and become lazy was just blown out of the water, because what she said was, I don't want to become reliant on AI right now. I'll use it, but I want my brain to be operating at a high level of critical and creative thinking. I don't want to waste away, because when we don't use a muscle can fade. It's like if you don't work out for a few weeks, you're naturally going to have muscle deterioration. But if you start working out, you get obviously stronger and more healthy. So it's the same kind of thing with our brain and how we use it. If we stop using it in critical and creative ways, then that part is going to become smaller. And it's interesting because the discussions at that tertiary level of education have all been around that we are missing that Bloom's taxonomy. We're skipping the fundamental and the foundational level of learning, which is the ability to identify right, wrong, the ability to identify, is this aligned to the objectives or not, and going straight up to the top of that Bloom's taxonomy, meaning creating and generating, which the common error in that framework would be if you do not know the fundamental level of learning, meaning you're able to identify if this is right or wrong. When you use generative AI to write an assessment task, to write something of critical or creative sort of communication, you're not going to be able to identify, is this hallucinating? Is this making it up? Because the thing is with generative AI, it creates based on your prompt that you give it. And ultimately, it will make up and it'll say with absolute purpose that this is the right answer. And it could be a load of crap. And if we don't have that fundamental level of identifying, describing, actually embedded in our education and consistently using it, well, then we're going to be in a rock and a hard place. But the ultimate thing that is missing from all of this, as I said right at the beginning, when we're talking about ethical use of AI, is the student's voice. How are students using it? What are they using it for? How do they actually interpret? Because that general term to say all students are using it to cheat, to plagiarize, to actually shortcut processes is a load of crap. Because when you actually talk to students, like I just told you about, then you can see that they actually want to use their brain for what it is designed to do at a high end level, rather than relying on generative AI to basically shortcut that critical or creative thought process. So there's this whole perspective shift when we're talking about AI in education and the ethical use. And it's interesting between the links between, as I said, Google and that course that I've just completed, because they're similar. They don't necessarily talk about their client or the people that they're serving. And it's the same in education. And for anything to move forward, we need to change that story. We need to change that narrative. So something to think about, something to consider while you are engaging in AI use. I'm going to leave it there. Remember, effort equals results. I'll see you in the next one.